Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Matty here, and the new mini set, Triumphant Light, has just released, and a lot of awesome new cards have come with it. We've talked about them a little bit over the last few days, but today we're going to take a look at deck lists, all of the best new decks that have come to Pokemon Pocket with the new mini set. So there was actually some tournaments going on today that incorporated all of the new cards. It's super early in the metagame right now, so we don't necessarily know what decks are best or the most meta viable, but we have a lot of awesome and creative new deck lists to take a look at today. I think we have like 10 or over 10 different decks incorporating all of the new Pokemon. Let's get right into it. Comment below how you're playing the new cards. I would love to hear examples of your guys' deck lists and what you think is going to be the best new decks and new cards of this new metagame. I'm really excited. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Stay tuned because we're going to be covering the metagame and how it develops over the next few weeks. So if you want to stay tuned on and up to date on what the best cards are and what the best decks are, this is going to be the channel to do that. So let's get right into it. So the first deck that we're taking a look at here on the screen is going to be Leafeon with Yanmega EX. So Leafeon probably was one of the most hyped up Pokemon from Triumphant Light, this new mini set. So it's really cool. Leafeon pairs really nicely in a lot of the ways that we've already been playing the grass type cards that are kind of dominating the format right now. Of course, we have Exeggutor, we have Celebi, we had Jungle Totem Superior, and we have Erika's. There's just a lot going for the grass type right now. Cyrus made the format move away from a one-shot metagame, which really helps these grass type decks that are really fast-paced, aggressive, and have good tempo with a lot of staying power, with Giant Cape boosting their HP, Potion and Erika's healing them up. And now we actually have the new Irida card, which actually heals as well, but it only works for Pokemon with water type energies attached. The really cool thing about Leafeon when paired with a card like Yanmega EX is that these Pokemon primarily have colorless energies in their attack cost, and Leafeon EX with the Forest Breath ability allows it to accelerate and generate, grass type energies and attach them to any of your grass type Pokemon. So in this deck, we're playing water type energies so that we can not only still attack with Yanmega and Leafeon just like we normally would, but we can actually utilize Irida to heal our Pokemon on top of Erika's. It's a really fun new strategy here, very creative as well. This was just one example of this type of playstyle. And we're still able to use the Solar Beam attack on Leafeon. However, Yanmega EX definitely going to be our primary attacker here. One thing to note is that we can't accelerate and generate those energies with Forest Breath unless Leafeon is in the active spot. Now, not that big of a deal. Leafeon's retreat cost is 1, so is Yanmega EX. Same with Eevee and Yanma. So every Pokemon here has a retreat cost of 1, but we are playing X speed just to have that free retreat available to us. A very consistent deck here. 2 stage 1 Pokemon with 140 HP. Giant Cape brings them both up to 160. Again, 120 damage with Yanmega EX is pretty significant. On top of that, we also have Leafeon to attack with. It's a really consistent deck here, and the staying power is what's really phenomenal. Should give us that extra edge when we're going against things like Exeggutor and Celebi, which have good healing, but not necessarily as consistent damage in the mid game. So I really like this particular deck list here, and I think that Leafeon is going to be probably one of the more impressive cards of this set. We'll have to see again when the metagame develops. I still think the grass type is going to be one of the best grass type decks, or one of the best types of decks in the games, I should say. But yes, this is Leafeon and Yanmega. Very cool. Again, we're playing water energies in this deck so that we can not only heal Erika's, which only works for grass Pokemon, but we can use Irida, which only works for really any Pokemon as long as they have water type energy attached. So really cool, creative way to play this deck here. I really like it. Next up, we have some Arceus deck. This is an Arceus Infernape EX deck that actually did pretty well in a competition today. I really like Arceus and Dawn. I think that it goes together extremely well. Again, Giant Cape is really important in decks where we're playing Arceus, but also Heatran. The new Heatran here with the Speed Link ability gives it free retreat. Same with Rotom. They both get free retreat when Arceus is in play, so really nice to have free retreat options because Infernape also has free retreat. So a lot of synergy here and a lot of flexibility being able to move in and out of the active spot pretty reliably. Heatran is an interesting card. It does 40 damage, but it does 40 more if it has any damage on it. It's got 110 HP, which isn't a super high amount of damage, but like I said, right now in the format, not a lot of Pokemon are doing significant amounts of damage. It really is more of an aggressive / tempo-based format, so we're not even getting one-hit KO'd by a lot of Pokemon in the format. Plus, Giant Cape does bring us to 130. That's enough to live most hits, and then, again, Revenge KO, or take another attack for 80 damage, plus weakness on a lot of these grass-type decks that are going to be running rampant in the format. Infernape as well, being able to one-hit KO Exeggutors with weakness, and we have Rotom as well to finish off Pokemon on the bench with Dash Attack. I actually like Rotom. I think that it's a lot better than people give it credit for. It's really flexible. Along with Cyrus, it gives us basically an alternate win condition to take KOs without really having to worry about KOing that active Pokemon. We can bring up the bench Pokemon with Cyrus, or we can just kind of KO it and finish it off with Rotom in the dash attack. I really like this deck list. I think that Fire has actually been buffed pretty significantly. Infernape and Dawn was always pretty good, but now I actually think it's a bit better with Arceus EX. I think Arceus fits in a lot of different decks, as we're going to see in this particular video. One of my favorite Pokemon in the entire game right now. I think Arceus is a lot stronger than people initially thought it would be. Again, we'll have to see as the meta develops what decks really rise to the top of the metagame. But the Fire type archetypes, which when paired with Arceus, are actually, I think, a little bit better than they used to be. So again, this is a deck that is doing fairly well in competition today, and Heatran is a card that I think some people are a little bit slept on, paired with Infernape. I think, again, the free retreat in this deck is really unique and really, really fun. One of my favorite playstyles that has, I guess, emerged from not Space-Time Smackdown, but Triumphant Light. All right, let's go on to the next one here, which is going to be Exeggutor EX with Arceus. So again, we were playing things like Celebi EX or Yanmega with Exeggutor as sort of that attacking option, that backup attacker. The cool thing with Arceus EX is that you can pair it with really any type, as we talked about before, and we already know that Exeggutor is one of the best strategies in the game, or at least it was in the last format. And in the last metagame, there's no reason to believe that Exeggutor isn't going to be also one of the best cards of this format as well. So why not pair it with Arceus, which gives it a very consistent attacker doing 130 damage. We're not playing a lot of Pokemon in this deck, so typically you would think that playing a lot of Pokemon with Arceus is probably what you want to do. That way you're kind of guaranteeing that your bench is full, so you're getting the full damage from the ultimate force attack. But the one thing that you have to consider is that Arceus has 3 energies, and in a deck like Exeggutor, it's probably going to be quite a few turns until we're even attacking with Arceus, because it really is that late game attacker, which means we have plenty of time to fill up our bench and find those Pokemon with Pokeball or just draw into them. And even if we need to, we do have the new Celestic Town Elder, which allows us to take a random basic Pokemon from our discard pile and put it on our bench. Can be really good, again, to bolster up that damage with Arceus EX. We still have access to Erika's, however, Erika's doesn't work for Arceus, so you got to keep that in mind. But we do have 2 Giant Capes and Rocky Helmet. We have Leaf to retreat out a little bit more freely. We have the 1 Cyrus, 1 Sabrina combination. Very similar, again, to a lot of the other Exeggutor decks that we saw of last format, except now we're able to utilize Arceus EX as, again, a very, very consistent attacker. Similar to Yanmega, but it's, again, I think a little bit better in the sense that it's not an evolution Pokemon, it's a basic Pokemon. So if it does start in the active spot, it has a lot of HP, so it is pretty safe, at least safer than having a Yanma in the active spot. But yeah, I just wanted to showcase this because, like I said, what might end up happening in this format as time goes on is that similar strategies to the last format of the Space-Time Smackdown format might rise to popularity. And that being said, we might just be plugging some of the new cards into other cards that were, already in well-established decks of the previous format. So you got to keep that in mind as well. Not something super creative or I guess crazy, but still a very consistent and a very strong deck in its own right. Exeggutor is not going anywhere, I promise you that. Next up, we have Garchomp. So there's a couple of different ways that I've seen people play Garchomp, and the more I think about it, the more I think that Garchomp is actually a pretty decent Pokemon. It's weak to grass, and I think that's really the one downside to Garchomp. Being a fighting type Pokemon, it had to have some type of weakness, so they did give it grass, which is kind of interesting, even though, Garchomp, I think, is neutral to grass. I'm not actually sure the typing charts in the official Pokemon games or whatnot, but we are pairing Garchomp with Lucario. And I think what's really cool about this deck here is that we're able to attack on curve, so to speak, with Gible, Gabite, and Garchomp. They all have 1 energy in their attack cost, and they're not super substantial attacks. But like I said, if we're able to draw into these Pokemon basically turn after turn and just attack every turn as we evolve, you got to think that with the buff from Lucario's Fighting Coach, that's actually quite a bit of damage. By the time Garchomp is fully evolved, we're hitting for 100 damage plus the Lucario buff plus the 20 or the 30 damage plus that we would be doing with Gible and Gabite as we evolve. It really is a nice kind of flowing deck. It's actually a little bit more consistent than you might think. I don't think Garchomp is a bad card whatsoever. We also have the ability to do 50 damage to a bench Pokemon, which really opens up a lot of win conditions in the late game for Garchomp. A lot of HP as well, 170. Again, we are weak to grass. I think that's probably the one significant downside to Garchomp EX, but I do think it's a much better Pokemon than I previously expected it to be. We'll have to see if it sees that much play or that much success in the metagame, but there are a few different ways we can play Garchomp. This was just one example that I saw. Of course, I wanted to showcase it, and I do always love Fighting Coach Lucario. So if you wanted to play Garchomp and Lucario together, I think this is a pretty simple way to do it. I don't think you have to pair Garchomp and Lucario with things like Hitmonlee or Hitmonchan or things like that. Personally, I think just attacking on curve with Gible, Gabite, and Garchomp is actually pretty decent as well. So I really like this deck. Again, it's a lot more consistent than you might think. And yeah, Garchomp is better in my mind than I initially thought it might be. But let's look at the next Garchomp tech, which is actually going to be using the new Medicham. So if we're not using the Fighting Coach Lucario, we actually have things like Medicham, which is a really consistent, or not consistent, but a very explosive early game attacker. It's a stage 1 Pokemon with 1 energy in its attack cost. And a lot of people probably hear me talk about this a lot. In Pokemon Pocket, being a stage 1 Pokemon is actually pretty advantageous because basically you're able to evolve before your opponent if you go first. It's one of the only upsides to going first in Pokemon Pocket. But of course, as we know, you don't get to attach an energy before your opponent. That can be a downside. However, when we have 1 energy in our attack cost, it's not really a downside whatsoever. In fact, we would almost rather be going first so we can evolve first on our second turn and attack for Kick Shot. Now, this is a really interesting attack. It does 80 damage for 1 energy, but you have a 50-50 chance that it does nothing. So a very inconsistent attacker in terms of that. It's on average, you're doing 40 damage, but that's not how the math works out. But sometimes you are on turn 2 doing 80 damage and then on the subsequent turns doing 80 more damage. And it's really a really strong high roll deck. I think Medicham is actually kind of slept on. I think people will probably not play Medicham that much from a competitive standpoint because it is, of course, a little bit more RNG dependent. But overall, you can't dispute how absolutely insane 80 damage on turn 2 is. It's on par with things like Exeggutor. So for a stage 1 Pokemon, 100 HP, fighting type, you're weak to Psychic, you're not weak to Grass, so that's pretty significant as well. And then again, we're pairing it with Garchomp for the late game. A lot of our Pokemon have low energy attack costs, so we should be able to attach multiple energies to Garchomp while we're evolving it to be able to use Dragon Claw late in the game. I know Dragon Claw's damage is a little bit lackluster, but it should be enough, at least if you are able to get like 1 Kick Shot off to, finish off KOs on most Pokemon in the format. But nonetheless, this was the other Garchomp deck that I saw that was pretty fun. There's a lot of different ways that we can play Garchomp. This just utilized some of the new cards, and I just wanted to showcase at least a couple of decks that I saw doing well in competition today playing Garchomp EX. Next up, let's take a look at another Arceus deck. This one's a little bit more simple, just playing Arceus with Rotom and Heatran, similar to the last deck that we saw. Not playing Infernape in this deck, but what we are able to do here is play a lot more trainer cards, and this does allow us to run things like 2 Giant Capes, Potions, Leafs, Cyruses, Giovanni as well with Dawn. I think Giovanni and Arceus actually goes pretty well together, getting to that 140 HP mark. I think it is pretty significant. So I think that Giovanni might make kind of a return to the format. We'll have to see. We still don't have any tool removal cards, so Giant Capes are still pretty prominent. But Arceus can 2-hit KO any Pokemon in the game, so it is a very consistent Pokemon in that own right. But here, we're really utilizing the main sort of speed link attackers here. Again, I think that the free retreat makes things super flexible, and it makes leading with Heatran and Rotom not bad whatsoever. This deck has a lot of great leads, especially with 2 Leafs, so if we do lead with Arceus, we can just retreat pretty freely and a little bit more consistently. We also have the Dawn combos to be a little bit more flexible with our energy. Again, a lot of synergy with Dawn and decks and Pokemon that have free retreat. So I like the Speed Link Dawn combo with Arceus. I think it's pretty popular. And again, I think that Heatran is pretty slept on in the format right now because one-shot, meta is kind of fallen off with Cyrus. So it basically allows Heatran to get a guaranteed like 40 and then 80 damage off in most case scenarios. And that is enough to KO a lot of Pokemon in the game, especially all of those grass Pokemon that we're hitting for weakness, like I said. So again, I think that the Speed Link strategy for Arceus, whether we're playing it with Infernape EX or not, is still really strong. One of the highest or biggest upsides in my mind to this entire kind of Arceus archetype. But we'll see. There's a lot of other ways to play Arceus. Let's take a look here at a Leafeon deck that is not playing Yanmega like we saw earlier, but just playing Celebi. And yes, this is also going to be a water type deck here, playing Irida. So the cool thing about Celebi is that it has a grass energy and a colorless energy in its attack cost, but we flip coins for every energy attached to Celebi, not necessarily every grass energy. So Celebi actually works just as well as Yanmega in a deck here utilizing water energies and the Irida Leafeon combination. I think we're going to see this very prominently in the format. Again, the combination of 2 Giant Capes, 2 Ericas, 2 Iridas with Leafeon and Celebi is really dangerous. The cool thing about Celebi as well is that it is not a bad Pokemon to start with because we can Powerful Bloom on our second turn. We don't have a lot of retreat options here, so realistically, we're probably going to be parking Leafeon in the active spot for as long as possible and just absolutely dumping all of our energies onto Celebi to take massive KOs in the late game. We saw, again, a very similar deck to this early in this video with Yanmega, but I do think that Celebi is still one of the strongest Pokemon in the entire game. Again, the fact that it's, Powerful Bloom boosting effect does work for having water energies attached to it, not just grass energies, means that Celebi actually fits into this grass-water combo deck really interestingly. And again, a ton of healing here. Giant Cape bringing these Pokemon's HP up to 160 and 150 respectively. That's actually quite a bit of HP when you consider that, you know, we're healing for Erika's and Irida basically every other turn while pumping up that Celebi for the late game and doing a consistent 90 damage with Leafeon as well. In the early game, you can accelerate energies to Leafeon itself with its own ability, so you got to keep that in mind as well. I think this deck has a ton of really great synergy. I really like the Irida Water Leafeon decks. I think that they're probably going to be one of the strongest decks in the game. So this was just another version of it. Again, if you have Yanmega, or if you want to play Yanmega, or if you have Celebi and you want to play Celebi, there's just a couple of ways to do this. This deck here is not running a lot of Pokemon, which means we have room for extra trainers, which means, again, 2 Sabrina, 2 Cyrus, 2 Irida, 2 Research, 2 Erika's, 2 Giant Cape. This deck is all about doing exactly what it wants to do as much as possible. Can be super annoying to deal with, and the cool thing about decks like this is that they counterplay Exeggutor decks pretty well with all of the extra healing, and I really think that this is going to be one of the strongest strategies in the new metagame. But again, we'll have to see, right, as things develop. You never really know, but you know, I think that this is it's pretty strong. I don't have really much else to say about it. Next up is more Arceus. This is going to be Dark type Arceus. I think something that people definitely were really adamant on was that Crobat, the new Crobat here with Cunning Link, is quite good. The 20 extra damage every turn to the active Pokemon is pretty substantial, and again, we can kind of just pair this with Darkrai in place of Magnezone, and then instead of just running Darkrai, we can run Arceus with Darkrai, and it makes this deck really interesting. We're not always attacking with Arceus or attaching energies to it. All we really need is Arceus to be on our bench, therefore being able to activate that Cunning Link ability by Crobat, and then we can just basically attach our energies to Darkrai. I like this deck a lot. Very similar to other Darkrai decks that we've seen. We are running a lot of Pokemon in this deck, so it can be a little bit inconsistent. We're running 4 different basic Pokemon, but overall, odds are we're probably starting with either, you know, Kangaskhan, Zubat, or Arceus in the active spot. We do have Leaf to retreat out if we do start with Arceus. If we start with Kangaskhan, that's totally fine. We're just going to start Dizzy Punching until we get KO'd. So I really like this strategy. Again, I think it has a lot of potential. I don't know if it's going to be necessarily as fast-paced or as aggressive as maybe it has to be in a format like this format, but we'll have to see. I do think that Darkrai and the Dark typing is still really good. Darkrai is one of the best cards in the entire game. Again, that 20 damage from Nightmare Aura paired with the 20 damage from Cunning Link is super substantial if it does come online relatively early enough. We still have enough room in the deck to play, of course, our Researchers, our Pokeballs, 1 Pokecom, 1 Giant Cape, 1 Cyrus, 1 Leaf, and 1 Sabrina. I really like this list. It's something I'll have to test myself to see necessarily how consistent it is, but it has been doing fairly well in competitions just today. Again, as time goes on, we'll have all of the data, so we'll really be able to crunch down and understand what ends up being at the top of the metagame. And the other thing that I'm going to mention here is that you don't have to play these exact 20 card lists. Just the overall concepts, I think, is what I want to, I guess, showcase here today. If you wanted to, swap out a card here or there, totally feel free to do that. It might actually make the decks better. Testing is kind of what we have to do, right, in these formats early on to find out what's best. So don't feel like you have to play these exact 20 card lists. Go ahead and feel free to swap out some cards if you need be. And comment below what you would swap for any of these decks. How would you change them? But yes, Dark type is still really good. Again, Arceus, Crobat, Darkrai is super cool. Really good. I really love it. Next up, we have Metal type Arceus. So here's the thing. Dialga EX, I think, got a lot better from this expansion. I think that Arceus EX pairs really well with Dialga, but we also have the new Probopass, which we'll see in a little bit. I think that Dialga really is a lot better than people give it credit for. I've said that a couple times in this video, but I think it's just a little bit underrated. We are playing Skarmory with the extra tool cards as well as a strong leadoff if we're not leading with Dialga. So depending on what happens here, we should have decent options in the early game. Dialga EX can feel bad if you're going first, because you're not able to Metallic Turbo until turn 3. That can feel bad, but that's kind of where Skarmory's here to, fix some of those gaps, I should say. We're also running 1 Tauros. Again, it's kind of similar to Arceus in the fact that it does very similar amount of damage. It does 120, Arceus does 130. They're both colorless Pokemon, basic Pokemon with 3 energies in their attack cost. So I think that this player here playing this particular deck maybe just didn't have a second Arceus and they were playing Tauros. I would probably recommend just playing 2 Arceus instead of an Arceus and a Tauros, because I think Arceus just does what Tauros does, but better, even though it's a stage 2, or not a stage 2, a 2-prize Pokemon. But overall, like I said, I think that Arceus actually pairs really well with Dialga, and why not play Skarmory, because Skarmory is, of course, one of the best cards in the format. We're not playing the new supporter card here, called Adamant, which reduces the damage done to Steel-type Pokemon, but I do think that if we were playing a purely Steel or Metal-type deck, I think playing Adamant could be pretty advantageous. It allows Dialga to stay around for a little bit longer. So yeah, but here's just one example, or at least, you know, somewhat of an example of playing Arceus with Dialga. I do think that it's going to actually be a pretty significant archetype. I think it's a great way to play Arceus as well. And here is something that, we're doing this. We're showcasing an 18 trainer Arceus deck. Now you might be wondering, like, how could you possibly play Arceus with no other Pokemon? You need a full bench. Well, luckily we have fossils. Fossils do this for us in a very interesting way. When fossils Jeez Louise. When fossils are on our bench, they act as basic Pokemon. So yeah, you don't actually have to run other Pokemon with Arceus. You can just play fossils and get that full damage from Ultimate Force. Now the thing with this deck is that there's no way to accelerate energies to Arceus here. You kind of just have to attach, but the cool thing is that we can use water energies for this deck so that we can utilize Irida to heal up our Arceus. We're playing Giant Cape to boost its HP, also Rocky Helmet. We have room for, you know, Research, Giovanni, Sabrina, and Cyrus. Again, Giovanni pretty good in Arceus as well, but I think this is a really interesting 18 trainer deck. Just a ton of fossils, 5 in total, should really consistently allow us to fill up our bench here. And again, you know, just do that full damage with Arceus. I don't think this might be the best way to play Arceus. I'm sure some people are just going to think this deck is pretty silly, but it's a lot better, again, than you might think, because, again, we're able to use Irida, and we're guaranteed almost to do that full 130 damage with Arceus. So as long as the game goes long enough, as long as we're not getting absolutely, you know, flooded in the early game, if we can go second and get those 3 energies on Arceus by turn 2, or turn 3 rather, we should be able to pretty consistently do 130 to 140 damage with Giovanni turn after turn. It's not a bad strategy, it really isn't. I just wanted to showcase this. Maybe you have Arceus, but you don't have any of the other Pokemon. Pretty funny deck list, if I say so myself, but I wanted to at least showcase it because, yes, it does exist. 18 trainer Arceus, here it is. Next up is actually going to be Magnezone with Arceus. That's something that you maybe haven't seen so far in this video, of course, is Magnezone. I still think that Magnezone is a very, very relevant card in the format. I know that it's not new and people might be a little bit sick and tired of seeing Magnezone everywhere, but I still think it's going to be one of the most relevant Pokemon in the entire game. Again, I think that Arceus as a Pokemon is a basic Pokemon, and that pairs with other basic Pokemon similar to Darkrai. We can actually just play the Arceus combos here like we see with Heatran and Druddigon, and a deck like this playing both maybe fire and water energies, probably just fire energy I would assume, but basically able to just slap Magnezone in this deck. Now what I would like to see in here, as opposed to maybe, you know, a Leaf or Giovanni, is maybe we're playing a Dawn, because I do think that Magnezone and Magneton being able to accelerate energies and then being able to just attach them or move them to Arceus early in the game with Dawn could allow us to attack with Ultimate Force a little bit earlier. And that might end up being, honestly, just one of the best ways to play Arceus is with Magnezone and with Dawn. Similar to how we saw in the Zapdos deck of last format, I think that Arceus is just better than Zapdos, but it fits in almost the exact same way, so we'll have to see as well. But I think that the Heatran, again, as we're seeing again, Heatran is just really, really good with Arceus. I think it's a very underrated card, especially in this current metagame, early metagame, that's probably going to be very much dominated by grass-type decks, I would say so. And then next up, if we take a look at this water-type deck here, this is going to be the new Glaceon card, just paired with Manaphy and Palkia. So we all know about the Manaphy Palkia strategy, but the cool thing here is that Glaceon actually is a pretty decent frontline wall. In a deck here, basically, where we lead off with Manaphy, we can spread both of those energies to our bench to Glaceon and our Palkia, set them up in the meantime. We can use Misties on all of our Pokemon to set them up as well. But the upside here is that what's different now, I should say, other than, you know, what it was before, was that we have Irida. And I think that Palkia is actually going to end up being, in all of the Palkia decks and Manaphy decks, are going to end up being extremely, extremely good. We don't see Arceus in this deck, but you could swap out Glaceon for Arceus and just have it as an additional attacking option. Overall, I think that being able to Oceanic Gift with Manaphy to really any Pokemon and spread those water energies out to be able to then heal those Pokemon later on with Irida is just a really, really good strategy. Glaceon, I think, is a little bit underrated in my personal opinion. If we can get it set up early enough and get it into the active spot, that snowy terrain actually does quite a bit of chip damage, especially with the extra, or not extra HP, but the additional healing that we get with Irida, allowing Glaceon to stay around a little bit longer, and then finish off the game with Palkia EX. I really, really like Glaceon. I think it's, again, a lot better than people give it credit for. I've said that like 10 times in this video, but I really do believe it. I think some of these cards initially didn't seem that strong, but I think that the water type archetype in general, no matter how you're playing it, has gotten significantly better with Irida. A lot of supporters in this deck, to be fair. We are playing Dawn, Cyrus, Research, Irida, and Misty. 2 Rocky Helmet as well. I think that Glaceon with Rocky Helmet and Irida is just really, really good. It's a lot of extra damage, basically. It's just a ticking time bomb. If we're not able to one-hit KO this Glaceon or get rid of it early enough, that snowy terrain with Rocky Helmet is doing a lot of extra damage. And again, Irida keeping it around for longer makes Glaceon a lot more dangerous than you might think, especially in a format right now that isn't super explosive in terms of its the damage output. Decks are really fast-paced and they do early damage, but they're not doing substantial damage. They're, you have things like Exeggutor, and I guess like the new Arceus card doesn't attack even until turn 3 or 4. So Glaceon does have potential to be actually a lot better than I honestly thought it would be. And overall, I just think that Manaphy and Irida is super, super good. And there's a lot of decks that you can splash these 2 cards together in that is going to seem really, really, really good. We'll have to see exactly if water rises back up to the metagame. Again, if it does rise up to the metagame, we still have Magnezone, but the cool thing about Glaceon is that it's not weak to electric. It's weak to steel. And we're probably not going to see as much steel type as we're going to see, electric type or other types in the game, honestly. So Glaceon being weak to steel, I think is actually a pretty big advantage for Glaceon, and I really, really like this particular deck list. And lastly, here we have Probopass. So I think Probopass was kind of memed on a little bit. I don't know if it's going to be as good as the other cards in this format. I think that, again, 160 HP is pretty significant. 90 damage with defensive unit isn't, don't sleep on it, right? 160 HP, 90 damage for 3 energies. We can boost it up with Metallic Turbo with Dialga. And yes, we take 20 less damage from attacks. We can also pop Adamant to take 20 less damage from attacks on our opponent's next turn. And then again, we can also, stay alive for a little bit longer with potions and Giant Cape. So it's a really interesting deck here. We'll have to see just how good this Probopass damage reduction strategy is in the format. I'll be really interested to see, but I think that at least now we have another Steel type EX Pokemon to pair with Dialga, and why not play Arceus as well? That way, if we have some extra energies that we're, accelerating with, Metallic Turbo, we can kind of get them on Arceus to do 130 damage, which of course is more than 90, so keep that in mind as well. But, honestly, if there was a card that was able to heal Steel-type Pokemon, I think this would be very, very impressive. You even could play like Manaphy and Irida with Probopass, and I think it would actually be somewhat fine. But overall, very interesting deck here, and I think that Probopass does have a chance at least to be somewhat relevant in this format. Who knows? We'll have to see. But yeah, this was just an example of a bunch of different decks that I wanted to showcase, utilizing all of the new cards that we got in Triumphant Light. Again, comment below if you guys think I missed anything, or if there's any deck lists that I didn't show that you think are going to be really strong or that you're playing right now. I would love to hear it, but again, I just wanted to touch on all of the new cards and all of the new interactions and strategies that we're probably going to see in the metagame, but definitely stay tuned, because as the weeks go on, we're going to get a lot more information and data and statistics from a competitive standpoint to see exactly what decks are at the top of the metagame. The other thing as well is that at the end of March, we are getting ranked battles, which is something that I think is really, really exciting. Well, we don't know all of the details yet. It could be pretty non-impactful, or it could be massively impactful to Pokemon Pocket. Either way, definitely stay tuned for this channel, because at the end of the month, when ranked battles come out, we're going to do a lot of ranked battle videos and strategies and deck lists and things like that focused around the in-game ranked battle ladder. So should be pretty fun as well. But again, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, guys. Again, comment below what decks are you playing, what cards do you think are the best. I would love to hear your guys' opinions, and we'll have to see. Stay tuned, because this weekend there are some pretty large tournaments that are going to be showcasing all of the new cards. We're going to see exactly what decks end up doing well. It should be really, really fun, so stay tuned. Meta Monday's coming up, Tier List Tuesday as well. We should have enough data by Tuesday. I'm hoping to give a pretty accurate tier list, a ton of new decks. Honestly, if I had to summarize, I think that Triumphant Light is really interesting. When Mythical Island came out, which was the last mini set, and this is just what I'm going to end this video on, by the way. When Mythical Island came out, there was a lot of new specific archetypes that were really strong. We had Celebi, and we had Gyarados, and we had Druddigon as well. So there was a lot of like brand new archetypes that really dominated when Mythical Island came out. What's cool about Triumphant Light is that I don't know if there's going to be a lot of necessarily brand new archetypes that are going to end up at the top of the metagame, but all of the previously existing archetypes are going to be shifted and changed based on just plugging in a lot of these new cards into them, which I think is really, really cool. It's kind of refreshing to see, at least. We'll have to see if the metagame does evolve in a way that's, fun, or I guess a good time for us players. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here, guys. Don't forget to like the channel. I said it again. I literally did it again. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Peace out, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you guys tomorrow. And yeah. Bye.